incredible puppy follows Officer for 3 days. What he discovers will leave you amazed and touched. Officer Jake Thompson trudged through the sweltering heat of Maplewood, the kind of day that made you want to sink into a cold pool and forget the world. Yet there he was, feeling the familiar weight of his badge, heavier than the summer sun bearing down upon him. The town that had always been a peaceful sanctuary now felt tainted, each street corner whispering tales of corruption. The pressure coiled tightly around his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking beneath the surface. Fighting back the fear that rippled through him, Jake reminded himself that Maplewood deserved better. The echoes of laughter from children riding bikes sliced through the air, beckoning memories of simpler times. It was a community where everyone greeted each other by name, but behind the warmth of their smiles lay shadows he couldn't ignore. Rising crime rates, graffiti, and hints of powerful figures exploiting the town plagued his mind. The specter of his father's legacy loomed large, reminding him of the man who once stood for justice, and now, Jake felt he was failing to carry that torch. As he walked, consumed by these thoughts, out from the shadows came a scruffy little puppy, all scruffy fur and soulful brown eyes. The pup's instincts seemed locked on him as if he'd actually been seeking Jake out. Naming him Scout, they bonded unexpectedly, injecting moments of joy into his long, uneventful patrols. But with Scout trotting by his side, Jake felt the duality of his life. There were moments of sheer delight, accompanied by an undercurrent of despair. "Why is it getting worse, Scout?" he would mutter absently during their evening strolls. Just the two of them against the fading daylight and creeping darkness. Then there was the night when he stumbled upon graffiti, ugly splashes of color tarnishing the beloved local park. What was meant to be a haven for children transforming into an unsettling reminder of something sinister. With each incident he uncovered, the knot in Jake's stomach tightened. He wrestled with the growing dread that he might have to expose these truths. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Internal conflict churned within him, faced with the decision of whether to protect his career or fight for justice. What if he exposed the truth and lost everything? His mind raced with possibilities, the impending fallout, the shunning from his own community, the shadow of his father's legacy slipping further into obscurity. Jake's breathing felt irregular, tension coiling tighter around him. He glimpsed in Scout's eyes a naive loyalty, a reminder of what mattered in the world. A moment of despair surged through him, contemplating the decision that lay ahead. Would the puppy's innocent companionship give him the courage he so desperately needed? As they approached the long-forgotten park, Scout stepped ahead, as if sensing something that Jake couldn't. The air shifted, tension thickening with every step. Time seemed suspended, just before a fork in the road, a precipice of truth and deception. Jake clenched his fists, the agony of indecision mounting heavier within him. Uncertainty felt like a weight settling on the world around him, ready to explode. Would he speak out? And if so, what would it cost him? As Jake stood at the edge of confrontation, the shadows surged around him, and Scout remained steadfast, an unwavering beacon in a storm. What would happen next? The flickering streetlights illuminated the path before Jake, but shadows danced ominously in the corners of his mind. The pressure to conform to silence, to protect his job, gnawed at him like a relentless insect. Every step felt heavier, weighed down by unspoken truths and buried secrets. His heart raced and he paused, searching for clarity amid the chaos of his thoughts. "Scout," he said, looking down at the puppy, who tilted his head inquisitively. "What am I supposed to do?" The dog's innocent gaze only mirrored the turmoil within him, but in that moment, it sparked a glimmer of realization. Jake needed to take control. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the warm summer air that carried the scent of blooming jasmine mixed with the lingering stench of decay lurking in the forgotten corners of Maplewood. The decision to confront the troubling realities of his town wasn't just about him. It was about redefining the legacy he inherited from his father. The man had fought hard for justice, but had also masked his own fears and failures. Now Jake felt the weight of those untold stories pressing down on him. Determined, he set his course toward the park, where the graffiti marred the place of childhood joy. With the vestiges of daylight fading, he tapped into an inner reservoir of grit, unsettling yet familiar, that had been dormant within him. "What if we cleaned it up, Scout?" he mused as they arrived at the park's entrance. It was more than just the physical act of removing the paint. It was a symbolic cleansing. Standing before the defaced playground, he envisioned how it used to be. Children's laughter echoing in the sun, parents watching over them, a place of safety and joy. The thought stirred something deeper in him, urging him to wield his badge not only as a symbol of authority, but also as a weapon for change. Pulling out his phone, he documented the graffiti with several photos, conscious of the juxtaposition between the dilapidated image and the memories it held. Posting them online seemed risky. He was aware of the consequences of exposing such truths. Yet, what lay buried beneath the surface of his fears began to surface. Perhaps transforming his apprehension into action was worth the gamble. Looking at Scout, who remained steadfast, a newfound resolve ignited within him. "Adventure awaits, buddy," he said, giving the pup a quick pat and an encouraging smile. Together, they would embark on a journey, challenging the very powers that sought to dictate Maplewood's fate. Jake promptly crafted a plan. He needed allies, people who shared his concerns. Reaching out to trusted friends in the police department felt imperative, but even more integral was connecting with ordinary citizens. This would allow him to foster a movement, one that could rise against corruption and reclaim their community. The warmth of the summer evening felt invigorating, fueling his dreams of transformation and justice. As he pocketed his phone, the rustling of leaves drew his attention. A figure emerged from the shadows, blending with the darkening landscape. Instinctively, Jake felt his pulse quicken. Was this an ally he could trust, or a threat to his mission? "What now?" he whispered, his heart racing at the unexpected confrontation ahead. As Scout bristled, Jake braced for the unknown, realizing the moment had come to face his deepest fears head-on. Jake took a step back, his instincts sharpening with each heartbeat. The figure in the shadows lingered, unmoving, while a low rustle from behind revealed Scout's unease, the puppy's soft growl breaking the tension hanging in the night air. Adrenaline coursed through him, igniting both fear and curiosity. This was his chance to confront the uncertainty he had been grappling with for weeks. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice steadier than he felt. He clenched his fists, prepared for whatever might emerge from the darkness. The last thing he wanted was to appear weak or indecisive. He had to show confidence, to claim his place within the community he longed to protect. The figure stepped forward, partially illuminated by a flickering street lamp. To Jake's surprise, it was an older man, his face etched with lines that told stories of hardship and resilience. The man had an air of defiance, an aura that intrigued Jake. "Name's Arthur," he said, pausing as he gauged Jake's reaction. "I've seen you around. You're fighting your own battles, aren't you?" Jake's heart raced even faster. This wasn't just a chance encounter. Arthur's words resonated, reflecting the turmoil Jake couldn't vocalize but felt universally. "Yeah, you could say that. This town, it's not what it used to be." Arthur followed Jake's gaze to the graffiti that marred the park's playground. "People think ignoring problems will keep them at bay, but it only festers," he replied, eyes glinting with a wisdom rooted in experience. "You're on the right path, but you can't fight a war alone." That simplistic statement struck deep within Jake. The weight of his father's legacy and the pressure to maintain his job had often overshadowed his desire to rally others. Arthur's presence ignited a sense of urgency. It was time to build connections. "I need help," Jake admitted, surprising even himself with this revelation. "But how do I get people to listen? Everyone seems content to look the other way." Arthur chuckled softly. a hint of empathy in his tone. You get their attention by showing you care. Start with small acts, but make them count. He shifted closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a long-held secret. Clean this place up. Make it a meeting ground. Engage the kids, their parents. They'll follow your lead. Each word sank into Jake's mind, and with that, a vision unfolded. He envisioned the park bustling again, children playing freely amidst the laughter that once echoed there. He saw the adults making pledges to protect their own squares of Maplewood. Can we really turn things around? Jake asked, his doubt mingled with a flutter of hope. Absolutely, son, Arthur replied firmly. It starts with belief, but it also requires execution. You've got to put your plans into action. Jake nodded, absorbing the weight of the advice. He felt a sense of belonging as a rush of purpose flooded his system. Perhaps Maplewood still had the potential for revitalization. Perhaps he was not meant to walk this path alone. Paperwork and bureaucracy will chain you down, Arthur continued, his gaze steady. You're an officer. You enforce the law. But remember, you're also a member of the community. Taking a breath, Jake permitted himself the possibility of change. He would no longer hide behind his badge or the unspoken rules of his profession. The lesson was clear. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is often the strength needed to inspire. With every intent to act solidifying in his mind, Jake turned to Arthur. What's our first step? The older man grinned, a hint of mischief lighting up his face. You're forgetting one crucial detail. The power of your voice. Now, let's speak to your fellow officers and approach the citizens. Show them the heart behind the badge. As they walked away from the park, Jake's spirit soared with newfound enthusiasm. He thought of the connections he could foster, alliances yet to be formed, and the lingering shadows of silence ready to be dispelled. But just as promise filled the air, a sharp crack broke through the night, a gunshot in the distance. Fear jolted Jake's heart as he turned to Arthur, knowing deep down that this was a challenge he hadn't anticipated, one that could shatter the very hope he was trying to build. Let's go, he said, bolstered by urgency, realizing his journey had just gotten more complicated. The night had laid a new challenge before him, thrusting him back into the tumult of uncertainty. How could he reclaim the safety of his community when dangers still lurked in the shadows? Jake's heart hammered in his chest as the echoes of the gunshot dissipated into the silence. Instinctively, he reached for his radio, but he hesitated. Arthur's presence reminded him that in that moment, there was more at stake than official protocol. There was a community that needed a protector, not just an enforcer. Stay close, Scout, he whispered, kneeling to the puppy's level as they moved cautiously towards the sound. It felt like a test. The very essence of what he was hoping to achieve was under threat. Could he muster a response that wasn't just born from fear? With every step, Jake reflected on what Arthur had said. Perhaps it was time to approach this incident as more than just a police matter. If they were to confront the shadows, he would need more than authority. He'd need to rally people, not just officers, but the very residents he aimed to protect. But how to balance that with the immediacy of potential danger? Arthur, he said, abruptly halting in his tracks. We need to call for backup, but let's not alert everyone just yet. I want to know what we're dealing with first. Arthur nodded, his expression one of silent approval. They crept through the darkness, the tension palpable between them. Scout's low growl reminded Jake that danger was tangible, but so was the energy pulsing through him, a mixture of fear and adrenaline that propelled him forward, binding him to Arthur in this shared mission. As they approached the copse of trees, Jake's thoughts raced ahead. This wasn't just about stopping criminal activity. It was about establishing trust, proving to the people of Maplewood that their safety was paramount, his primary duty. If he could contain this situation without escalating it, maybe he could inspire more than fear. Perhaps he could inspire hope. They reached the edge of the trees and crouched, peeking through the branches. A small group of young men loitered, exchanging words too rapid to be heard from a distance. Jake's gut tightened. This could either be a drug deal or a gang meeting. Either way, it was a glimpse into the chaos he believed had to be confronted, and he felt the weight of his responsibility growing heavier by the second. "What's the plan?" Arthur whispered, amping Jake's anxiety yet providing a sense of purpose. As he formulated a plan, Jake felt the heat of determination surging within him. "We need to observe, assess their dynamic, but we can't let them see us yet. If they're armed or feeling threatened, they could easily react violently." The shadows flickered with movement, his heart racing as he focused on resolving the burgeoning conflict in his mind. How to step in and ensure safety without fueling the flames further. What would it take to convince them that they didn't need to fear his badge, but rather could trust it? Could he also demonstrate to the townsfolk that their own leadership could emerge from this? "Look," Jake said, nodding towards a nearby cluster of homes that bordered the park. "I can call for backup now, but first, I want to see if I can diffuse the tension." Arthur raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his face. "You think that's wise?" Jake took a deep breath. "Sometimes the threat of confrontation remains simply that. A threat. I want to see if we can turn it into dialogue." The words felt bold and reckless simultaneously. Could he genuinely face these men, speak to them, and listen to their frustrations? It required a bridge of vulnerability, but wasn't that the very essence of leadership? Resolute, Jake adjusted his stance. "I'm going to approach. Stay back and keep Scout calm." Without waiting for a response, he stepped toward the group, heart pounding in rhythm with his purpose. As he neared, Jake's mind swirled with questions. What if they rejected him? What if they didn't see the humanity he sought to embody? But beneath the growing trepidation lay a profound realization, a chance to reclaim not just the safety of Maplewood, but his own voice. And just as he prepared for that first risks-fueled step, a voice from the shadows called out, cutting through the tension. "What do you want, officer?" Jake's heart sank into his stomach, knowing that the moment of truth was upon him. The question loomed large. Could he find a way to connect and build a bridge, or would he face a confrontation that could unravel everything? In the distance, the muffled sound of sirens echoed, a reminder that time was slipping away and that he was fully engulfed in a mission that could either forge alliances or spark unrest. How would Jake navigate the fine line between enforcing the law and earning trust? Jake swallowed hard, instinctively straightening his posture. The voice had an edge, tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. He was standing at the threshold of confrontation, where carefully measured words could either diffuse hostility or ignite it. "I'm just here to talk," he called back, his voice steady despite the uncertainty coursing through him. "I know it's late, but it's not the time for trouble." The gathered young men exchanged wary glances, momentarily parsing his words. Jake took a calculated step forward, consciously projecting an image of calm authority. This was about more than just the badge, more than a power struggle. He needed to show them he was not their adversary, but rather an ally in a world that could often feel cold and distrustful. "What's there to talk about?" One of the men finally responded, his tone laced with skepticism. "You think you can come here and change anything? Ain't nothing new to say." A knot formed in Jake's stomach, the weight of his mission pressing heavily against his chest. He could feel Scout's warmth against his leg, offering unspoken support. He took another breath, realizing that vulnerability could also be a form of strength. "Maybe not," he conceded, allowing himself a moment to pause. "But I believe in open dialogue. There are issues brewing in our town, and if we don't address them together, things will only get worse." The group's reticence was oppressive. They weren't afraid of him, they were tired, disillusioned, and what he needed was to connect with that shared humanity. "Why should we trust you?" another young man chimed in, his tone softer but still defensive. Jake hesitated, knowing the answer could either break or build bridges. "Because I've seen what happens when fear drives us, when we don't engage. Sometimes it feels easier to wear the badge as a shield, but I realize it can also be an opportunity to truly protect, to listen." He locked eyes with each of them, noticing the flicker of intrigue mixed with skepticism. He had stepped outside the rigidity of protocol and embraced the rawness of his own emotions. Now, he just needed to guide theirs. The truth is, I don't want to be a force that you only see from a distance, he continued, leaning in slightly. I want to be part of the solution. Can we start fresh? What are you all facing out here? Silence enveloped them, but Jake noticed the tension easing ever so slightly. One of the men finally spoke up, his voice barely above a murmur. You don't get it. We're just trying to live, man. But everywhere we turn, it feels like we're judged, like we're labeled criminals. How are we supposed to trust someone who's supposed to protect us when all we see is enforcement? Jake's heart sank. It was a sobering truth, a reflection of the barriers erected by division. I know I'm not here to fix everything, but I'm here to listen, he said earnestly, his voice maintaining a calm timbre that pushed against their fears. I want to understand what you're going through and how we might move forward. A flicker of belief ignited in one young man's eyes, but doubt lingered, and Jake could feel the air growing heavy with unspoken resentment. The challenge now lay ahead. Could he navigate this tumultuous landscape of distrust and unearth solutions that could resonate with their realities? As the first sign of genuine engagement emerged, the distant sirens grew louder, reminding him of the precarious nature of the moment. The looming threat of backup was a double-edged sword that could bring safety or escalate the situation. He needed to act quickly, but without scaring them back into silence. Look, he said, deciding on a more straightforward approach. I can call in the backup now, or we can have a conversation. I'd rather seek understanding than drive you further away. That single statement hung in the air, pregnant with promise and danger. Call them, the first young man replied defiantly. We don't need your sympathy, officer. Jake felt the finality in that response, the weight of the challenge before him thickening with unresolved emotion. His stomach twisted, recognizing the critical choice that lay ahead. The moment of truth wasn't just about involvement, but about redefining his role in this community. As he reached for the radio, he contemplated who he would truly be, an enforcer or a bridge. The realization hit him hard. This would be about more than just this night. It was the beginning of a deeper understanding, an unveiling of potential alliances. What if he could become both protector and friend? In this moment of raw vulnerability, one question echoed. Was he equipped to embrace this new layer of leadership, or would he retreat back to the safety of a box he had thought was his? With the radio still in his grasp, he hesitated, the sirens a fading echo as Jake contemplated the belief that there was power in transformation. But could he accept the responsibility that came with it? Jake's heart raced as he stood, fingers hovering above the radio. Every breath felt significant, punctuating the solemn weight of the moment. This wasn't merely a standoff. It was a defining moment packed with the possibility of change. Redefining the narrative wasn't as simple as he had hoped, and doubt seeped into the cracks of his resolve. Maybe I don't need to call them, he murmured, his internal dialogue threading through chaotic thoughts of his own fears about authority and the expectations that came with it. The balance between duty and compassion wavered precariously, the sirens barely a whisper in the background. Yeah, why not? The young man challenged, arms crossed defiantly, but Jake could see the flicker of hope mingling with skepticism in the eyes of his companions. You're just buying time until you can flex your badge. Jake took a calculated breath, trying to tune out the noise of the world swirling around him and center his thoughts. One of their concerns echoed in his mind. The feeling of being judged, labeled. If he wanted to change the way they saw his badge, he had to unearth his deeper motivations, those that went beyond the confines of law enforcement. The truth is, he began, his voice calm but firm, I'm a human being too. It's not just about me. This isn't about enforcing rules. It's about earning trust, and trust can only grow from understanding. His eyes scanned the young men's faces, searching for the glimmer of connection. I see you. I want to hear your stories, your struggles. Tell me what it feels like to be judged every day. I've had my own run-ins with distrust. Maybe we're not as different as you think. Silence spread over the group like a thick fog, the tension simmering just beneath the surface. For Jake, the enormity of the moment was startling. He felt squared between fear and opportunity, a crossroads that threatened to define his future. A young woman stepped forward, anxiety clouding her features. "What do you know about it?" she pressed, her voice barely containing her frustration. "You have a badge. You don't know what it's like to be called a thug before you even open your mouth." Jake clenched his fists, a surge of anger mixing with understanding. "You're right. There are things I'll never know. There are walls around your experiences that my badge will never break down. But I'm here, trying to find a way around them. Can you give me a chance?" He watched her process the statement, the flicker of conflict in her eyes revealing layers of fear and hope. It was a start. As another voice interjected, the questions turned introspective. "What do you want then? To throw us a lifeline?" Jake straightened, breathing through the noise in his head. It wasn't the classic appeal of authority he had learned to perform. This was raw, unfiltered, the essence of a conversation that could change everything. "I want to forge connections," he admitted. "To build something where we don't just coexist, but truly understand each other's pain. I can't promise you will trust me overnight, but I promise I'll earn it." The eyes of the young men and women narrowed, assessing, calculating. They were searching for signs of sincerity, determining if he was all talk, and for the first time, Jake felt the chains of his identity begin to shift. The badge still represented authority, but it had the potential, if wielded wisely, to stand for protection, honesty, and community. He was about to rewrite the narrative that had defined his life for so long. Then came the sharp, low rumble of a police car in the distance, cutting through the fragile atmosphere they had been cultivating. In that moment, Jake realized the urgency of his predicament. Would he stand as a wall to protect his position, or would he strive to be a channel of understanding when all else demanded an adversarial approach? With every heartbeat, the clock ticked closer to a monumental choice. Would he retreat to the familiarity of his role, or step into the role he had begun to envision? He took one last breath, surveying the faces around him as the sirens approached, and reached for a new truth waiting to be uncovered. Could he transform the badge from a symbol of authority to one of trust? The answer lay just beyond the blaring of those incoming sirens, as uncharted territory awaited him on the other side. What he didn't know was what awaited him could either cement his path forward or bring everything crashing down around him. Jake's pulse quickened as he caught the faint sirens piercing through their fragile tension. A sudden resolve surged within him. If this was to be his moment of transcendence, he needed to act. He faced the young woman, whose expression mirrored a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "Look, I know what I'm asking is monumental, but if I'm to shoulder this badge and the responsibility it carries, I need to start with vulnerability. Can you help me understand your world?" The air shifted as her defensive posture softened just a fraction. This wasn't merely a dialogue, it was a negotiation of sorts, one woven with raw emotion and the promise of an uncomfortable truth. As the murmurs behind her gathered strength, Jake sensed the crowd leaning in, eager for resolution yet wary of falling into the familiar traps of misunderstanding. "You want to understand?" she said, her voice steadier now. "Try living helpless in a world where trust is currency, a world where just walking down the street feels like a declaration of war." The fierceness in her eyes could have pierced stone, and Jake felt the weight of her words settling heavily upon his shoulders. "Then let me walk that world with you," he proposed, his voice low but resolute. "Show me what that feels like." With each passing second, Jake realized the weight of his promise. Could he truly step outside the armor that had protected him for so long? What unresolved biases lay beneath his own facade? A murmur swept through the small crowd, rippling like an electric current. The young man next to her nudged her arm, incredulity etched across his features. "You actually believe him?" he asked, jaw clenched, revealing a flash of protective instinct. She glanced at Jake, then back at her friend. Maybe it's worth a shot," she responded, showcasing a tentative but growing openness. As the police car's sirens grew louder, their message packed more urgency. The cacophony blared like an alarm bell, pressuring Jake to crystallize his intentions. Either step back into the rigid circles of authority, or plummet further down this path of genuine engagement. "We can't just sit by and let the narrative unfold without us," Jake asserted, The words spilled forth in a wave of enthusiasm. If I don't take action now to transform this space, I might lose the chance to let go of the past and help shape our future. He glanced briefly at the police vehicle now visible on the street, its flashing lights a stark contrast to the openness he sought to establish here. A knot of apprehension twisted in his gut. Would the officers mindlessly spill into the moment he was trying to cultivate? Were the people in front of him prepared to engage, or would they retreat into safety? Let's create a dialogue. Right here, right now, Jake proposed, his voice steady, but laced with urgency. He couldn't shy away from the opportunity forming before him. Trust doesn't sprout in silence. It arises in these moments. His challenge hung in the air, shimmering with infinite potential. Steeling himself for the unknown response, he waited, anxiety twisting in his stomach. Every eye bore into him, and he could feel the shifting winds of change swirling just below the surface. The young woman nodded slowly, still processing the weight of their conversation, while her friend remained visibly skeptical. "You think you can rewrite everything with just words?" he shot back, the tension crackling again. Jake paused, weighing his next move with care. "No, but I believe we can set the stage. If we don't start somewhere, we'll remain stuck in this cycle." What loomed before him was more than just a conversation. It was an opportunity to unravel preconceived notions, to transform shared experiences into understanding, and to defy the easy labels that kept their worlds apart. Yet the rapid approach of the police vehicle suggested that time was running out, and soon, the powers that had shaped their interactions would dictate the narrative once again. Could he truly face the tendrils of his own fear and authority while forging a new path with those standing before him? Or would he falter as the sirens bore down, confronting him with the reality that time for transformation may not be as forgiving as his aspirations? The sirens echoed ominously, reminding him that the next moments could shape not just his identity, but also the fragile trust burgeoning in this shared moment. In the depths of his resolve, the true challenge awaited him: courage in action, or retreat into an all-too-familiar role. Jake's heart raced as he became acutely aware of the impending police presence, yet the moment felt fragile, delicately balanced between confrontation and connection. He shifted his weight, grappling with the uncertainty of the consequences that could arise from his proposition. Vulnerability required courage, and here he was, standing at the precipice of a monumental shift. The young woman regarded him with renewed intensity, her gaze no longer clouded by skepticism, but rather laced with an earnest desire for change. "What if we start with something simple?" she suggested, her voice steadying as she took a deep breath. "You could listen. Really listen. It's not just about understanding the words, it's about feeling the weight behind them." Her assertion hung in the air, charged with authenticity. Jake nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. Listening was a skill he had always considered secondary to action, but the reality struck him hard. Actions rooted in misunderstanding could spiral into disaster. He realized that words alone, without the scaffolding of genuine empathy, would fail him. "Okay," he said slowly, taking a moment to gather his thoughts in the face of this profound insight. "I'll listen. But I also want to share my perspective. It has to go both ways." Her friend's expression hardened again, arms crossing defensively. "You don't get it, do you? Sharing your perspective sounds easy for you but can be a form of dominance. You're still in your comfortable world, while we are exposing our wounds." Jake felt the weight of that accusation, the truth sinking deep within him. He was here, yet still untouched by the harsh realities she faced each day. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but one he needed to acknowledge. "Maybe I've been too quick to assume," Jake admitted, searching for words that might bridge the chasm between their worlds. "But I need your help to articulate my experiences too. Perhaps together, we can build something better." Her friend shifted uncomfortably, but the young woman's expression softened further. "Okay." She hesitated before speaking again. "How about we start with where we feel the most vulnerable?" A chorus of murmurs flickered around them, signs of curiosity igniting in the crowd. Jake's impulse surged, not wanting to lose this momentum. "Let's begin then. What does vulnerability look like for you? What stories do you carry?" As she began to share her experiences, Jake leaned in, focused on her voice, the cadence of her words, and the emotion lacing them. She spoke of moments where trust was betrayed, detailing encounters where her mere presence incited suspicion rather than kinship. Each revelation struck Jake like a blow, and with every word, layers of his own privilege began to peel away. The sirens loomed closer, and inside, Jake wrestled with the realization that the world he occupied was a mere shadow of the one she navigated daily. The risk of disapproval from his peers in the police force panged at the edges of his consciousness. Would he face their ire for daring to embrace vulnerability? Or would that very act illuminate deeper connections? As she finished, her eyes scanned the now captivated crowd, inviting others to share their narratives, to voice their fears, to reclaim their power through stories. Jake's throat constricted as he felt the call to contribute his own voice, but grappled with his newfound understanding. How could he reiterate his experiences without overshadowing the weight of hers? The hum of conversation slowly began to rise around them, intertwining with the shrill pitch of approaching officers. The police vehicle pulled to a stop, and Jake felt the heat of the moment nearly suffocating him. He knew the forthcoming interactions charged with tension could shatter this fragile space they had begun to build. If he didn't act decisively, the opportunity to foster mutual understanding might slip through his fingers in an instant. As the officers emerged, Jake prepared to confront not just them, but the looming uncertainties within himself. Was he ready to redefine his relationship with authority amidst an atmosphere so thick with mistrust and fear? The pivotal moment had arrived, but the outcome remained entirely unfathomable. Jake's breath hitched in his throat as the officers stepped onto the scene, their imposing figures dwarfing the vulnerability he had been trying to nurture just moments before. The young woman's presence beside him felt like an anchor, yet also a stark reminder of the weight of his actions. He had opened the door to this critical conversation, and now he was faced with the potential repercussions of their shared vulnerability. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself, but the growing tension in the crowd was palpable. The murmurs of those around him began to coalesce into anxious whispers, each individual wrestling with their own expectations and trepidations. It was now or never. He took a step forward, inserting himself between the officers and the young woman, feeling the heat of the moment burning in his chest. "I'm Officer Jake," he said, trying to imbue weight in his voice, one that transcended mere authority. "We've just been having a discussion." His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Every syllable felt like an act of bravery, challenging the familiar role he had always played. The lead officer turned, an eyebrow quirked in incredulity. "A discussion? At a time like this?" There was a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, a reaction that stung like a slap. Jake's stomach churned at the dismissal he faced, a harsh reminder of how quickly his peers could judge him. "Yes," Jake replied, maintaining his composure despite the internal tremors. "We're working on understanding each other better. There's a lot at stake here." He gestured behind him to the young woman, noting the way her guarded posture began to ease ever so slightly in response. One of the other officers scoffed. "You think they see you as a friend? These people are here to cause trouble." The confrontation made Jake's pulse quicken further, but he knew he could not back down. The conversation was more than just words. It was a stake in his definition of what it meant to be a police officer, and more importantly, what it meant to be a human being. "Listen to them," Jake urged, leaning into the truth he had just encountered. "These stories matter. We can't keep acting like walls placed between us are the solution. It only breeds more fear, more misunderstanding." The words poured out, anchored in conviction that shook him to his core. The lead officer's gaze narrowed as he assessed Jake, eyes simmering with skepticism. "You've been with them a few minutes and think you know better? You don't get to come down here and preach to us about understanding." The fragile connection Jake had started to nurture, however, was igniting a fire within him. The more he voiced his truth, the stronger the determination that brewed inside. He glanced back at the young woman, who was watching with a mixture of awe and apprehension. This was his opportunity not only to use his voice, but also to center their collective humanity. "Maybe I don't understand fully," Jake admitted, feeling emboldened by the weight of his previous realizations. "But I'm willing to try." This is our chance to make a shift. We need changes, and it starts here. For a moment, the air hung thick with uncertainty, as if the world were holding its breath. The murmurs from the crowd faded into silence, their attention fixated on the unfolding standoff. Jake's heart pounded louder than the sirens had moments before. Then an unexpected shift occurred. One of the officers hesitated, his expression softening ever so slightly. Jake could feel the tides beginning to turn, but it was an equally uncomfortable realization. This exchange could be a bridge or a barrier, bringing hope or destruction. As the tension lingered, a choice materialized in front of Jake. He could stand firm and risk further hostility, or he could redirect the conversation, looking for common ground amid a sea of doubts. Aware that his next action could define the trajectory of the moment, he took a deep breath, feeling the weight of both their worlds pressing against him. To bridge their realities, he needed to act decisively. Suddenly, the young woman stepped forward, her voice steady and clear, shattering the silence as she prepared to reclaim her agency. In that instant, Jake recognized the profound truth that resonated deeply within him. The path to understanding would always require shared vulnerability. But as she spoke, a new noise erupted in the distance, one of engines revving and tires screeching, sudden and alarming. It was a disruption that threatened to unravel everything. Jake turned, the anxiety knotting tightly in his stomach once again. Was he prepared for what lay ahead? Would their moment of connection endure amid the chaos? The urgency of the unknown loomed large, and Jake could no longer ignore the escalating currents. The unexpected chaos intensified as the noise approached, a harbinger of the conflict lurking just beyond their fragile encounter. Jake's instincts kicked in, urging him to protect this moment of vulnerability that had been painstakingly forged. His heart raced, not just with adrenaline but with the weight of responsibility. The shift towards understanding teetered on a knife's edge. "Stay focused," he reminded himself, scanning the faces of the assembled group, sensing the apprehension mounting. He took a step forward again, his voice ringing out with authority, wrapped in empathy. "Everyone, we're here to discuss real problems. If we let fear dictate our actions now, we'll lose this chance for connection." The young woman beside him nodded, emboldened by his words, while the officers appeared torn between their duty and the unfolding scene. Jake focused on the lead officer, whose hardened expression began to show signs of conflict as he observed the growing unease in the crowd. This was a moment of truth. It was time to seize the opportunity for transformation. "Let's all take a breath," Jake proposed, his tone calm yet resolute. Moments of calmness in high-stress situations often lay the groundwork for breakthroughs. He spread his arms slightly, an invitation for dialogue, trying to bridge the widening gap. "We are not enemies. None of us want trouble. We want safety, understanding, and a future without fear." The distance closed marginally, the tension cracking slightly as the young men began to exchange glances. It was a flicker of possibility, but Jake understood that he had to build upon it. If we're going to change things in Maplewood, we must dialogue, listen, and ultimately work together. We owe it to ourselves and our future. The lead officer squinted, skepticism still etched across his brow. But the air around them shifted, the tension now thick with uncertainty rather than hostility. "What are you suggesting?" he challenged, breaking the uneasy silence. "I suggest we create a space for discussion," Jake offered, his voice steady. "We meet regularly, share our concerns, learn from one another, and explore where the divisions lie. If we don't start somewhere, we're just going to continue in these cycles of fear and misunderstanding." Arthur, who had been observing from the periphery, stepped forward, adding weight to Jake's proposition. "This town needs healing," he stated firmly, his voice resonating with years of experience. "And healing comes from trust. Trust that can only be built through accountability and visibility." Jake felt a rising surge of solidarity, the gathering igniting with a sense of shared purpose. Glancing at the young woman beside him, whose calm demeanor now radiated confidence, he pushed on, fueled by the collective moment. "We have the power to redefine relationships, not just with one another, but with the badge itself. We can move from authority to partnership." Slowly, responses began to ripple through the crowd, A few affirmations, a cautious nod of agreement, expressions shifting from guarded to contemplative. Each commitment mingled with flickers of hope, echoing in the quiet space Jake had sought to create. Then he turned to the officers who had been observing, seeing maybe for the first time a reflection of their humanity among the group. "You're out here trying to protect this community just as much as we are," Jake asserted. "This isn't about policing, it's about presence, awareness, and proactive engagement. We need to face our challenges together." In that pivotal moment, the realization washed over him. Even if the sirens of authority approached, they could reclaim this narrative through proclamations of kindness. He could shatter the patina of distrust imposed upon both sides, ushering in an era of collaboration. And with that realization, external validation emerged in the heart of the confrontation. One of the younger men stepped forward to speak, his voice shaking yet resolute. "Fine, let's talk. But know that trust isn't given freely, it's earned." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of the shift underlined by honesty. "I'm here to earn your trust. Let's start that journey together, not as adversaries, but as allies moving toward understanding." The lead officer gave a slight nod, observing the moment unfold, not as a conflict, but as a bridge toward a future that could be better for everyone involved. The world around them quieted slightly, the noise of engines and sirens fading into the background as they leaned into the heart of this challenge. The spark of change was ignited, shifting the purpose of their encounter. In this defining moment, Jake's transformation became a palpable force. He wasn't just Officer Jake, the protector. He was now Jake, the advocate for change, the voice for all who felt powerless within the structures of authority. This was his legacy, not his father's gilded badge, but a new path paved with communication, understanding, and joint endeavors. As they began formulating their first meeting, the palpable energy shifted around them. Jake stepped back, allowing space for every voice to emerge, while feeling the warm embrace of genuine connection. Not just as an officer, but as a leader willing to reshape destiny. And in that instant, he knew he had conquered his greatest fear. Not the danger surrounding him, but the fear of vulnerability itself, having transformed it into empowerment. Jake Thompson, once poised between duty and despair, now stood as a beacon of hope, ready to immerse himself fully in the journey of accountability, collaboration, and community healing. This was just the beginning. Jake's heart swelled with purpose, and as he glanced down at Scout, Alexander, the steadfast companion who had followed him through shadows, he felt a sense of triumph blossoming within. They had both discovered courage amidst uncertainty. Change began now, with community at its center. And for those reading this, remember, it's never too late to work toward understanding. You must take that leap of courage and reach out. Your voice can transform futures. Embrace that power. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.